Hey everyone, this is Eric Scott Pickard again from the Fifth Column News and the Pontiac Tribune.
And I'm John Carico with the Fifth Column.
And what we're going to do is we've got some members of the Industrial Workers of the World here. The Industrial Workers of the World, very old radical labor union. So we're going to have a discussion with some of the folks in Philadelphia who are involved in that movement. So we're going to go around the circle that we're in here from my left, and everybody can introduce themselves.
Hi, I'm Dan.
Hi, Dan.
I'm a native here.
I'm Jeremy. I'm a native of Philadelphia. I spent 4 years in Scotland, which is where I joined the Wobblys.
My name is John. I also live here in Philly, and I've been a Wob since 2001.
I'm Peter from New York. I'm actually an indie left journalist, and I cover a lot of revolutionary radical movements.
And we should say also that John and myself are both members of the IWW. We're both Wobblys. The Fifth Column is a very Wobbly-friendly organization. So I guess, why don't we kind of open up the floor. Is there anybody here who would like to discuss maybe a little bit of the history about the Industrial Workers of the World? Anybody want to take that?
Where do we start?
Yeah.
1905.
Can we speak up?
Well, yeah. So it came out of the labor movement. I mean, the American labor movement, I guess, had its origins all the way back to the 1870s, on the tail end of the post-abolition movement. Basically, as time went on throughout the 1890 unrest up until the 1900s, you had a lot of splits within the labor movement as people discussed tactics. So 1905, a bunch of different socialist and anarchist groups got together, formed the Industrial Workers of the World, off the idea of syndicalism, which is basically to build an organized workers as an independent force to challenge the capitalist class. Basically, to build power, to eventually take over factories, farms, other modes of production for worker self-organization. Anyone want to continue?
Yeah. Again, like you said, it was founded in 1905 during a time of the AFL was a more conservative craft union that Knights of Labor had declined at that point, and the AFL was at that time only organized white male skilled native-born workers that had a skilled profession. IWW was organize all workers in every country that it could, regardless of skill, race, gender, or other issues. And they had a much more radical, like he said, syndicalist. It wasn't officially anarcho-syndicalist, but it was of a syndicalist mode of doing things. And it's also, some people call it the International Workers of the World. It's actually the Industrial Workers of the World. It had its heyday. It's had its heyday in the late 1910s, early 1920s. A lot of it was crushed by the government for opposing World War I. A lot of radicals opposed World War I, and it still exists today, and it has its ups and downs. It's currently coming back around, and in the past few years, we tried to organize Starbucks in New York and a few other places, and some nonprofits, some other food and retail stores, and because that often reflects the workers of today. When we say industrial workers of the world, it doesn't necessarily just mean workers in industry, although certainly originally that's what it meant. It refers to a type of organizing that we organize people based on the industry they work in, kind of, rather than like their craft or trade, like the AFL-CIO does. And the IWW does not back political candidates or parties, and we haven't since 1910. and that's currently our politics. Again, not officially anarchist, not officially socialist, but around that. So we do have anarcho-syndicalist flags here. There's no strict rule about not having those. So since we're
Can we see some of your signs?
Oh, sure. This is like, you know, we were coming to an anti-war march, so this was for no war but class war, and just a few other signs.
Oh, we got our flags back here, right?
Yeah. This one says burn prisons. Kind of, I mean, it's sensationalist, obviously. Mainly with the whole like abolition movement. There's a lot of affinity. The anarchist Black Cross Federation actually started around the same time, and that was in Russia, and it's expanded all over the world since then. So yeah, the Wobblys basically believe organizing all workers, even like the unemployed, the homeless, like anyone who has the ability to work, anyone who has to sell their labor can be a part of that movement.
Can you?
How about you, John?
Can you explain syndicalism? Would anybody be interested in talking about what that means?
No? All right, Eric, do you have a thought?
If no one else does, I've spoken first.
Sure. Go ahead. No, go ahead.
Let's see. Well, I mean, syndicalism basically is the idea. It's a premise. I mean, in worker self-management, no bosses. The idea that in industry, workplaces can be run cooperatively. But the big thing, the syndicalism today is considered a method. It's a method of organizing militant radical unions. At first, it just like a collective bargaining contest, but eventually broader than that. Eventually, just to gain control of the means of production, gain control of workplaces, and kind of push out capitalism. It's often associated with general strikes, though certainly not all general strikes have been syndicalist, but it's using that as a method to abolish capitalism and some say the state, the anarchists in the state as well, and to kind of have like a cooperative society with less bureaucracy.
Speak up a little bit because of there.
To have a cooperative society that is workers work together and communities work together to control what goes on economically in a democratic fashion.
So, how would you say that labor unions, since specifically like the Wagner Act in '34, whenever that unions were legalized in order to stop workplace sabotage and
labor radicalism.
What do you think that current unions do that is antithetical to what the original concept for a union was? And do you think that nowadays that the word democracy at work, these kind of things, may be more of a better word to use because some people have a negative opinion of unions?
And that question's open to anyone.
One thing that they do that's pretty bad is the no strike clause. As long as you have that contract, you agree to abide by it and not go on strike and do anything. And that's really declawing a union where we know the bosses aren't going to follow the contract, so why should we, right? And they also have mandatory dues, like they're auto-collected. You don't even pay them yourself. There's no sense of connection whatsoever to the union. They have these business unions where they want as many workers as possible, so that they get as many dues as possible. And meantime, the workers have to share whatever small amount of hours and don't get paid near enough to make ends meet. And then they go on the radio and talk about how, we care about the workers in our community. We're a part of this community. And, meanwhile, no one can afford anything. They can't even afford to shop where they work at. And actually, I do think that democracy in the workplace might be a better way of broaching the topic of unions to people, especially since in a lot of places they have all these union busting training ads where they're told all this fucking shit about unions, but it's mostly a bunch of straw men.
What does the group think about, the concept that capitalism itself, and the corporate capitalist state, has created a corporation, even within supposedly democratic countries, that essentially mirrors a totalitarian state? You have power vested in a very few individuals, and then runs downward, and basically without any mechanism for democratic management or control.
Yeah, well, this was pretty much the goal of liberalism in the 18th century. The whole radical liberal revolution against the monarchy is that you had a group of merchants, bankers, slavers, this hierarchy of, if you will, a loose affiliation of different capitalist interests coming together to form like a joint stock company, which is called the United States of America. The United States of America was the first national joint stock company to be formed out of it. And that's basically what the whole idea was. That's why the president is the CEO, Congress is the board of trustees. You can see the various similarities in terms of how the political system is set up, which mirrors a corporation. And this is why it's totalitarian, because it uses the language of democracy. So shareholders, for example, this is a very democratic idea. Everyone with a share in the company has a say in where the company goes. So everyone with a vote, everyone who's a citizen has a share in the direction of the country. The parallels are very stark, and this is something that doesn't get talked about a lot. So, corporation is the most undemocratic organizational model that you can possibly have, other than a divine right monarchy. So, the reason being, obviously, you can see the instability in the 18th century that led to the Atlantic revolutions. They realized they had to organize a new type of power in order to maintain that hold over the working class.
What do you think about the idea that Crime Day recently had a pamphlet podcast they put out called From Freedom to Democracy? And they talk about how although we've wanted egalitarianism and equality and these kind of things from democracy since Rome, we haven't yet had any of that actualized through the democratic methods, or at least what we've been presented so far. Do you think that the 49% to 51%, like in Rojava, for instance, where they split off into groups where they can't come to a compromise, do you think that might be better? Do you think democracy basically institutionalized?
I'm familiar with the crime. I read their stuff every time they put out new content. I agree with them in some sorts. I'm not gonna be against David Graeber or Sidney Milstein, who are both pro-democracy anarchists. But I do think using the term democracy, especially in this day and age, the word is so divorced from any meaning anymore.
Yep.
That, everybody from Ahmadinejad to George W. Bush, Saddam Hussein has been using this term. And we saw it with Occupy, we saw it with the General Assemblies in terms of trying to come to consensus that maybe democracy is not really what we're trying to fight for. Maybe we're trying to fight to organize autonomously, to build power for ourselves. That doesn't necessarily we all have to be on the same page with every action, with every decision we make. Democracy can be limiting, it can almost be totalitarian in that way. That being said, I still agree with people using a left-wing connotation to it. So what's going on in Rojava and Western Kurdistan is, you can call it democracy, you can call it left-wing democracy, if you will. It's definitely better than anything that's been tried in the Middle East thus far. I do think it's probably one of the most progressive democratic states, if you will, in that region. I definitely support the Kurdish project 100%. It's all trial and error. We can't be utopian in terms of how we try to organize ourselves. We just have to try these different experiments and see what works, work out the kinks, see where things can go wrong. So being conscious about gender diversity is a huge part of the Rojava project. Being conscious about breaking down hierarchy, about creating these reverse hierarchies. So Rojava is an anarchist state. It's the only one in existence for it to like cooperate with other regions for supplies, goods, and whatnot, it had to build what they call a dummy state, which pretty much has no power, like formal power. The military power rests in the hands of the people of the militias, but they had to build the dummy state just to work with other countries in order to negotiate treaties to get through stuff.
It's interesting. During that, you mentioned David Graeber, pro-democracy anarchist. Another pro-democracy anarchist or libertarian socialist, Noam Chomsky. Both of them are members of the Industrial Workers of the World. And historically, there have been a lot of luminaries, a lot of interesting people in the Industrial Workers of the World. And it shows you that there is a great diversity of opinion within the union itself. You know.
Yeah, I know that down in Tennessee, we have Marxists who are, we have syndicalists, we even have a couple liberals who are just down with a little more radical when it comes to worker issues. So, yeah, I think IWW is a wide organization. It hits a lot of great points, and it helps us in that long road to anarchism. We come out and test us.
Yeah, does anybody want to talk a little bit about the experiences you've had, like either locally within your own chapters, or you know, the diversity within the IWW?
Yeah, so when I was in Aberdeen, Scotland, which is part of the Edinburgh branch in Scotland, I was trying to get one of my someone I knew from university, because we both did history, and he even ran for our student association as a divine right monarch, and is a complete reactionary. But I invited him along to with our Scotland-wide assembly. We had an information session, and I invited him along to that, and I actually convinced him that he should join the IWW as a more right-wing reactionary who jokes about being a divine right monarch, thought that it was a good idea. So it really is open to everyone.
Speaking of which, and this is bad, I was protesting at an Ameren conference, which is the American Renaissance, the group that Darryl Lamont Jenkins talked about yesterday on IWW. And there was a guy there who was from Cuba. He was a narco-syndicalist, but he was also at this Ameren conference promoting their fascist, right-wing, racist ideals. So I mean, any ideology can, you know, if you don't take, like he said, if you don't take a particular precaution towards the marginalized communities that exist in your paradigm, then no matter how well organized you are, you're gonna miss out on being able to actually actuate the kind of freedom that we actually want.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. You know, it brings to mind one of the slogans of the IWW: "An injury to one is an injury to all." Right. Does anybody want to reflect on those points?
Yeah, I think you definitely have to take a balance between like people with all different points of view, people who are aligned with people that obviously wouldn't be like obviously wouldn't have a neo-Nazi in the IWW. Maybe someone who was an ex-one that came and saw the light, but certainly not an active Nazi. But there's also I think in all these not just the IWW and like the union projects, but in all like organizations to like bring people around and kind of educate people about different things, because a lot of people, regardless of their background, might not be on board with everything, every like social lefty cause, and that's unfortunate, but it's something that kind of has to be taught. But if someone's like a member of like a very pernicious group that is actively going against it, that probably I would say would be a line wrong. And I don't know what, I guess the neo-Nazis, like the Men's Rights Association, or like, any of those would probably be groups that we wouldn't let in. But if someone has views that are different or a little off or something like that, like I think personally, and a lot of them, IWW's most of our work, I think it's definitely for educational on people like that, while at the same time try to maintain like a safe space for like everyone, so that marginalized can feel relatively safe in one big union?
Yeah, so my experience with NYC IWW, New York is historically very, is a birthplace for LGBT queer radicalism, so that's reflected in our present 21st century chapter. A lot of queer, trans people of color are involved in the IWW, and it goes back to its founding of being very diverse, being very open, being one of the few unions in the early 20th century to organize black workers. So it's part of its history is a diversity of identity as well as diversity of opinion. So there's a lot of affinity between these queer radical groups in New York and the IWW, and they work a lot with like workplace harassment as well as workplace organizing. So again, I hate to use activist speak, but it's this intersectional type of approach that the NYC IWW chapter has that really gives it its strength.
IWW also has a sex workers chapter to help out with people who are involved in sex work. There's a question I wanted to ask. What do you guys think about and this may be a controversial question, what do you guys think about the revolutionary communists, the Bombardier?
Oh, so this is actually, we deal a lot with them actually in New York. In New York, they're actually pretty bad, and which was why I was so. I'm covering the conventions. I've been to Cleveland. I'm here, so experiencing this group that they kind of organized to do these convention protests. I mean, I agree with 100% of what they're saying up until they say the word Baba Bacon. You know, they're like America was never great, and I'm like, yeah, they say like founded on slavery and genocide, which is why we need to get behind Baba Bacon. And I'm like, no. So like, but they are different. In New York, they're notorious for like during Black Lives Matter, the families are talking about their loved ones who just died. They go up, take the mic out of their hands. They're always trying to make it about themselves. But I gotta say, I'm impressed. But they're still doing their weirdness here. But like it's toned down a lot more than it is in New York. If you come to the New York chapter of the RCP is just, I don't even want to get into it.
I was just to say we do organize. The IWW does organize in a lot of prisons, a lot of prisoners, because prisons are one of the biggest expansion, like slavery industry. And in the prisons, we do have a lot of former African American Black Power activists. Some of which were actually Maoists, but I would definitely distinguish them from the RCP and the Bob Bakey, and maybe they worked with them in the past. But even my Maoist friends don't particularly like the RCP. So
same, yeah. We have one of the founders of the Class 4 camp from Occupy Ducati. He's a Maoist, and like he actually cut his teeth in activism with the RCP. And then as you get older and you're able to think for yourself, you realize it was really not good. So RCP is not a good representation of Maoism, and anyone who's interested in Maoism should try to look for different sources.
All right, does anybody have any final thoughts on the IWW? Any final statements?
Just a quick backtrack to the prison organizing. IWOC, it just should be stated, IWOC is probably one of the, it stands for Incarcerated Workers Organizing Committee. It's the prison organizing branch of the IWW. It's probably one of the largest running and most successful campaigns to be going on with IWW organizing right now. Especially in the context of mass incarceration of Black Lives Matter. IWOC, people should definitely check out IWOC, organize with IWOC. They work with Anarchist Black Cross a lot to do political prisoner support, and they've been organizing strikes, hunger strikes, and sit-ins in prisons for the past couple of months now, and it's really beautiful work. I just want people watching this to check them out.
I mean, just to clarify, certainly we're not the only ones doing work inside the prisons. There's other radicals as well.
Do you have anything to plug?
One of the strengths of the IWW is one of the strengths of the IWW is its pragmatism, that it's always punched above its weight level because of that. And that's why we have such a diversity. We allow the, rank and file to decide what in their workplace to take on, and every member becomes an organizer. And so, everyone may not agree with our long-term goals, but they can all agree on a better workplace environment, better pay, better health care, whatever it is that they need. And, the fact that, we can have this type of diversity is a good thing. And it allows us to network a lot better. It gets us support from people you normally wouldn't expect to, support an organization, this far to the left. Like, there are,
That is very true.
very right-wing people who, end up, going, oh, this is pretty good for me right now, so there's no reason why they shouldn't join, and so they do, and, eventually we can bring them in.
All right. Here we are. Back to you, boys.
We're about to go over to watch Eric Scott. Will be live streaming from the Pontiac Tribune. He's going to speak at an anti-war conference going on, it seems like. And on behalf of IWW, so we're going to
transition over there. I want to thank all of you for chatting with us. Solidarity forever, gentlemen.
Do you want to give your names one more time?
Dan?
Jeremy.
Eric.
John. Peter.
All right. I'm Eric Scott Pickard for the Fifth Column in Pontiac Tribune.
John Carico, Fifth Column.
And thanks for watching. We're going to be here all week at the DNC.